Hey, I'm Dylan. I recently went to the Port St. Joe Transformative Scenarios workshop. It was hosted by a couple of professors at UWF in conjunction with the community in Port St. Joe. Now, Port St. Joe might not mean anything to a lot of you. It's a really small town. It's on what's considered Florida's Forgotten Coast. But at this meeting, we talked about a lot of different things that are going on in that community. And a lot of it comes from historical segregation, it comes from industrial pollution. The thing is, it used to be this giant industrial powerhouse of production, at least like locally. They had a paper mill, they had a chemical plant, they had a bunch of things going on there as far as like industrial processes. And a lot of that really slowed down after the mill and the chemical plant both shut down. Gulf County was devastated, with some sources saying unemployment soared to 20%. While the jobs were missed, there were a lot of effects of pollution that weren't realized until after the fact in this community, because there were some studies done on the soil and the water after the fact that showed some concerning statistics. Homes in the North Port St. Joe community, historic and currently Black community, are sinking into the ground. The roofs and foundations are cracking and shifting as they descend into the topsoil. They were built on the old dumping site of the mill. Soil samples from the Department of Environmental Protection found arsenic, PCPs, vanadium, and lead in the soil. In 2002, homeowners and community residents protested the St. Joe Company, who was the former operator of the mill. So basically, the St. Joe Company, their mill that they used to operate back in the day, they filled in like a swamp or like a pond or something with refuse from the mill and then put some soil on top of it and then sold it to people who worked at the mill, primarily Black residents, because there is a thing called redlining, where banks would only give you a home loan to move into certain neighborhoods based on your race. And it was a property value thing, and it was determined by banks. And so when the St. Joe Company basically created this land on top of the refuse of the paper mill, what ended up happening was the redlining led to a Black neighborhood being built on top of the refuse.
They're living, I don't want to be overly dramatic, but this is a living hell for many of them. Like I have not lived years in a city that has been owned by that in effect has been owned by a single company who has controlled everything, and has even shaped my experience of life, But they have lived with that, and they're still fighting that, and still they're kind of being pushed down, even while they're fighting that, And so I just find a deep respect, because if it was me, I guess if it was me, maybe I also wouldn't have a choice. I would have to live with this, kind of.
2007, a claim for environmental discrimination on behalf of the residents of North Port St. Joe. North Port St. Joe is that Black neighborhood that was historically segregated. Revealed that the neighborhood was the only place that banks would give loans to Black residents, a phenomenon known as redlining. The claim by Carolyn Chapman, at the time the director of the Office for Civil Rights at the Environmental Protection Agency, says, for decades, the St. Joe Company, with the knowledge and acquiescence of the city of Port St. Joe, dumped toxic waste in the area. The Port St. Joe Company then sold the land to their Black workers for housing. She goes on to describe some of the ways the city of Port St. Joe intentionally disinvested in the North Port St. Joe neighborhood over the years. Chapman also claims that the city made deals with the St. Joe Company to sell off a marina while making the neighborhood a target of eminent domain through a revitalization program. The situation worsened for North Port St. Joe neighborhood after Hurricane Michael, a Category 5 storm, decimated Northwest Florida. Homes were destroyed, decreasing the already sparse amount of affordable housing, and others fell into disrepair. North Port St. Joe, unfortunately to the residents who want to see a different future in their community, is a prime location for industrial development. It has direct access to a intracoastal waterway, train tracks, and a deep water seaport. Locals recently won a fight against a liquid natural gas facility that was set to be constructed in their neighborhood. At the Transformative workshop, participants mentioned that the community wasn't notified that it was going to be constructed in their backyard. Public Citizen, a think tank out of Washington, D.C., reached out to locals about the project before there was any kind of announcement. The land owned by the St. Joe Company was intended to be developed by the liquid natural gas company No Petro. Several hundred Port St. Joe residents attended community meetings where they voiced their opposition against the plan.
I have been listening along the Gulf Coast to stories of people impacted by the petrochemical industry. And part of that has been fighting the liquid natural gas exports build out that has been happening in Louisiana and Texas. And I found out that there was an LNG export terminal proposed for Port St. Joe in this North Port St. Joe community, which is a traditionally black community that has recently received EPA grants as part of Biden's Justice 40 initiative to clean up legacy pollution and to invest in a new master plan. And so we definitely were excited when this LNG export facility was stopped, and there is now hope for a vision for the future in Port St. Joe that we're all really excited about. So in an area that has had pollution before, we see more pollution opportunities come in, because if people are already sick, you know, the new pollution is going to make them sick as well, but who's to blame? It's all confusing. So often we'll have these sacrifice zones where you know, opening up Port St. Joe and the North Port St. Joe community again to pollution, to this LNG facility, would have essentially created a ripple effect where more chemical plants and other polluters would have come into that community again, as opposed to amazing investment in micro grants to develop MLK Jr. Boulevard and opportunities to make this into a tourist area, to create a beautiful community on this coastline.
A lawsuit by Public Citizen and considerable community pushback led to the project being canceled. Industrial development, pollution, a legacy of racism, and a legacy of what many perceive as a good old boy system and local governments are just a handful of the threats to the North Port St. Joe neighborhood. Displacement is one of the most existential contenders brought up at the Transformative workshop.
Right now, Port St. Joe is really facing the fact that we've got houses that are sinking in the ground because they built on the landfill. That's one. We have some issues right now that center around the fact that there's no investment in any way, shape, or form economic development in the community. That's including trying to redevelop our downtown area, which is MLK Boulevard. That's including the lack of any kind of investments in trying to repair or the homes that are in the area, to include the fact that there hasn't been any new construction of any type of homes, to include rental homes in the community for the last 5 years. And so we got housing issues there, we've got housing, we got environmental issues in terms of groundwater contamination. We have issues where we have a large number of people who have diabetes, heart disease, respiratory diseases that we think that are associated with the fact that we were surrounded by a paper mill and a chemical plant. So we've got a myriad of not only health issues, but housing issues. And to be honest with you, our economic plight right now is in such dire strait that we really are looking at trying to turn that around so that we can at least have a community that has some ability to generate wealth. One of the things that I truly believe, that when communities come together, that we can demand change. And what we did in Port St. Joe was, when they notified us that this liquid natural gas storage facility was going to be put across the street from North Port St. Joe, we realized that we needed not only to focus on North Port St. Joe, we need to galvanize the whole community. And so what we did was we organized. We worked with the south side of town. We worked with Highland View. We worked with the communities that was across the bay from us, realizing that if they put that facility there, not only would North Port St. Joe have to deal with the health and safety issues, but the blast radius for this type of facility would impact these other communities, as well as if this facility was sitting there, those folks who live on the other side of the bay that have paid these $500,000 million or more for these homes would have to look across there and look at this facility, and that, not really knowing the impact it had, it could actually have an impact on their property values. So what we did was we pulled all of this knowledge and information that we had gotten about the facility, the impact it had on the community, the fact that it could have on the environment, the fact that what it could have on the climate itself, and the fact that the people were lied to and were told that this industry would create 200 or more jobs, when in essence, all it would do is create about 20 jobs in the end once it was built. So what we did was we brought all that information together. We had 3 public meetings where we brought people together, and we had experts to come in to talk about the blast radius. We had experts to come in to talk about the type of impacts that it would have with the dredging on the estuary there. The fact that it was no doubt that if this facility was put in place, that it would have a tremendous impact not only on the air quality, but also on the fact that there would be a massive amount of trucks and other transportation going up and down the highway. And the fact that if this facility was here, it could in fact have an impact on property values throughout the area. And so we were able to bring these folks together. So what we learned from that is, once you bring people together as a collective, they can demand accountability from our public elected officials. They can demand transparency. And then if we come together and the community wants something bad enough, then we can demand that it be stopped. And so this was an example of community activism, information gathering, and being able to show that together we can make a difference and we can change and make our communities safe and a place that we can live in harmony.